All right.
Okay,
Hey,
great.
Sumi, it's so great to have you today.
It is great to be here. Yes, wonderful to be here
Yes,
and to be inside where it's air conditioned. So,
yes. I'm actually not in the AC because we're trying to save a little bit of energy, but
okay.
that's not what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be sharing a lot of energy here on this podcast. So I want to make sure we're getting that flowing. So for today, we've got author and speaker Sumi Mukherjee. He published his first book titled A Life Interrupted: The Story of My Battle with Bullying and Obsessive Compulsive Disorder in July 2011. That was just his first of many other books that have been published since 2011. He's spoken to teachers, counselors, principals, administrators, psychologists, mental health professionals, and many more across the country. I know you've got a story, lots of stories behind you, but that is just a quick synopsis of our esteemed guest for today, Sumi Mukherjee, who's actually joining me from Minnesota. We just realized we're just a few miles away from one another. So really thrilled to have you virtually. We probably could have done this in person, but that maybe in the future.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Very, very nice to be here. Yes.
Terrific. All
Yes.
right. Well, I just want to start off with, launching point from your book, which we kind of reference in the introduction.
Sure.
In your book, A Life Interrupted, the story of my battle with bullying and OCD, you reveal some really personal experiences. For example, your 16-day admission to a treatment facility. Um, you know, what sparked you to share your story with the world?
What sparked me to share my story was the fact that it was something that initially I never thought I would survive. I never thought I would get through it to be able to uh, come out the other end and be in a better place. This, of course, this started when I was, my bullying and stuff was when I was a young kid in school, and it kind of went through elementary and middle school. It kind of tapered off after middle school. But right when the bullying finally was tapering off is when my severe mental health disorder began, which was a severe form of obsessive compulsive disorder, and that started at around age 16. So being that age, being young, and being in a situation where I wasn't very well educated about obsessive compulsive disorder. The education and the information was not as readily available as it was, today. It was not back in 1992 when this started for me. We didn't have social media, internet, iPhones, anything like that. So I didn't have the information, and I didn't know. I was in a place of real being naive and being ignorant of what was wrong with me exactly. And so I didn't think it was something I could ever get through. I kept it a secret for the first 5 years that I had this disease, from ages 16 to 21. I didn't tell another living soul, and that was a very difficult burden to carry because I always shared everything with the people closest to me, with my mom and my dad, my parents. I could always go to them with whatever was bothering me, and this was the first time in my entire life that I couldn't go to them out of fear that I was mentally insane or crazy. There was something really, really wrong with me, and that if I told people the kind of thoughts I was having, and the irrationality of those thoughts, and irrationality of my compulsive behaviors, which at the same time, while you have OCD, you can see how irrational they are. So it's a double-edged sword. You have this disease, and you're doing these things that are irrational, and you're thinking things in a way that's irrational, but you know it's irrational. So it's almost like there's that normal part of you is saying, "What the heck am I doing? This is so not normal." So you're aware that there's something so not right with you, and you don't know what it is. And I didn't know any better, and I really thought that if I opened up about this, I'd be put in a rubber room somewhere, and I'd be in a mental hospital. I'd be locked down. Everyone would find out that, Sumi lost his marbles. He went bananas. All the, analogies people use, which people shouldn't use, but those are the things people say. And so I kept quiet about it for a very, very long time. 5 years felt very, very, very long to me. Longest 5 years of my life. I'm 45 now, but those five were longer than the rest of the 40 years I've lived. Um, and finally, it all came out, and I was able to get help. And I didn't ever think I could be helped or cured when I was going through this. So, to answer your question, that is what inspired me. That the fact that I could go through something so horrific, and the hospital stay for 16 days wasn't even the bad part of it. I mean, that was in the much better years where I had told people what my problem was, and I was getting professional help. I was
Mm,
on meds. The dark ages were ages 16 to 21, and that was the most awful, 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 horrendous. You think you can only hit rock bottom once. You can hit rock bottom a million times, and those 5 years were just absolutely unbearable. I don't think too much about it today, generally, when I'm not talking about it, because I think maybe it's good to have that distance there, but I don't know how I got through it. And that's what inspired me to say that if I get through this and I come out the other end and I can actually have a life and stuff, I have to do something about it. I have to tell my story and help, because there's other people going through, people maybe watching this podcast that are going to be going through this, or that they have something in their life, whether it's that they're, you know, other examples I can think of, a big secret you can't tell anybody. You know, maybe it's somebody's being sexually abused. Maybe somebody has uh, a secret about their, you know, sexual identity, or something that they feel that if the rest of the world knew, they would be judged, they would be hated, they would lose their life as they know it. Those kind of things. It doesn't just have to be a mental illness, but that feeling of knowing that there's something you want to tell, but you can't tell it because you're scared. Uh,
mhm,
I
mhm.
want to reach out to anybody that's going through that, and that's why it was my inspiration for, uh, you know, getting out of the hotel business, and getting out of actually childcare was where I was after the hotel business, and deciding that maybe I become an author. You know, maybe I do some public speaking. I'd never done public speaking before to date, but to talk about my experience, because it's one thing that I am more skilled and knowledgeable about than anybody else on the planet, is my own experience.
Sure.
So I can't mess up on that. So it was kind of a safe way to get into it, and to make a difference for the next Sumi that's sitting out there, that's a teenager that's struggling so hard every minute of every day, and they don't think anyone can help them, and they don't know what to do with it, and that they don't think they can talk to anybody because what they're feeling is so off the rails to them. And
Mm,
I want those people to know that there's a place they can go, and that speaking out and getting help, because when I did speak out and get help, I was not received the way I had imagined for all these years and years. I would be, you know, seen as this horribly crazy person and thrown in a mental hospital and stuff. None of that happened. I was very well understood. So it was
sure.
really ironic. And so I want to help others, because I know I'm past it now. I'm 45 years old. Have been trying now since 2005, since I got out of that hospital, um, to uh, to be in a better place. But there's others that are going through this, and going through it fresh and new. And my old story maybe can help them.
Sure.
So
Yeah. No, and for those listening, Sumi's been all smiles and sharing his story. So very clear that he's overcome some obstacles that's worth cheesing about. Sure. So one follow-up question though, that I have is specifically during that period of 16 to 21, you're mentioning your obsessive compulsive thoughts. Are you willing to share any of those thoughts and what kind of things you were
yeah,
thinking?
absolutely. Yeah, they were just it started really simple, like it was irrational fears that, uh, did like if I had enemies at school, and if somebody walked past me real close, I'd have this thought: did they just hit me? Do I need to go hit them back or something? Did they just hit me? Did they just kick me or something? And they hadn't, and I knew they hadn't. But it's just this doubt about everything. I mean, doubt about
Mhm.
your very common perceptions. And OCD specifically is known as the doubting disease. The doubting disease. You doubt everything. And it would be stuff like as simple as doing this Zoom call. I could get off this call if my OCD were to kick in after this call. I could get off this call and say, oh, it would always come with feeling good about myself about something. And a good example, let's use this call. I could get off this call when we're done, and be like, oh, I did a Zoom call today with this nice guy that also lives in Plymouth, and I feel good about myself. And then right away, whenever I felt good about myself, the OCD would jump right in. And the doubt would be like, maybe you imagined the Zoom call. Maybe it never even happened.
Hmm.
And then it would be scary because there'd be a part of my brain that would like uh give into that, you know? I mean, it's
Mm,
like at first the normal part of me, the non-OCD part of me would say, well, of course I had the Zoom call. I know what it, you know, that I was on the Zoom call from 2 to 3, you know, there's no problem. I know I did it. I was there, you know, and then, but maybe you imagine the whole thing just to make
mm,
yourself feel better about yourself and to make yourself feel like you did something productive today. Maybe the Zoom call was a figment of your imagination. And
sure.
then I would try to prove that it happened. And I would try to say, well, okay, I remember specifically some things that the guy said to me, and he talked about Plymouth. So that's my evidence to myself that it happened. So I'm trying to
Mm,
convince myself that something I know happened.
yeah, yeah,
So you start feeling like you're crazy because a normal person doesn't need to do that, you know?
yep.
And I didn't know that this doesn't mean you're crazy. This is a textbook case of obsessive compulsive disorder. So it would start like that. And it just progressively, and the more you give into it, which is what I didn't know about OCD, is the more what you're supposed to do is let the doubt be there and just go about your day and ignore it, try to ignore it. And eventually it'll go away. But I would challenge it. I would say that, well, no, I remember I was in the podcast interview because the guy had a goatee, and I wouldn't have made that up because I saw it with my own eyes. So that's proof that I was there. And I remember he was wearing like a gray shirt and he had the, you know, thing over his pocket, a black dark mark there. So that's my proof that I was there. And I'd try to prove it to myself. And by doing that, by engaging the doubt, you're making your disorder worse.
Mm,
You're doing what you're not supposed to do. You're giving into the doubt, you're giving it credibility, you're saying, okay, this is a valid doubt, now I have to try to fight it. And that would take away from everything else I was doing, my homework, being able to focus on anything. And in fact, that fed the whole disease and made the disease worse. And what you're supposed to do is let the doubt be there and be like, you know what? I know I was on that Zoom call. I'm not going to obsess on it anymore. I'm going to go about doing something else. So it started like that. And then it just snowballed into every time I thought that maybe I can start talking to somebody about my problem, it just got worse and worse. And then there would be thoughts like, you know, and then I'd have images in my mind of the faces of different people who had bullied me. I'd have negative thoughts that if I don't try to mentally block out a certain image, that something horrible may happen to someone I love. Like magically almost something horrible will happen, or the way I
mm,
walk or the way I drink my water could cause harm to happen to somebody I care about, or that I would even be the one doing the harm to someone I care about against my own will. So it was these thoughts just got so, I mean, that's pretty scary stuff to think. And
mm-hmm.
you think, how will I be judged if I tell my dad, you know, Dad, I'm afraid that I could hurt you against my own wishes because there's this, or whatever is going on in my head. And I thought that, how am I going to be perceived? Are they going to think I'm a bad person? Are they going to feel like I need to be locked up for their own safety? All these worries were there. So that's what the thoughts were. They just became I mean, I kind of went through everything with OCD, the germs and fear of, you know, contamination and stuff, and checking things repeatedly, you know, checking the oven 150 times to make sure it's off, so my pet doesn't burn up in a fire, you know, stuff like that.
Mm,
But then also these horrific bad thoughts of death and demise and horrible things happening, always primarily to the people closest to me, because that's why the thoughts were the most revolting and terrifying to me, because it was always about people I loved. And then I would end up giving into those fears and doing the compulsive actions, or, you know, repeating as, could be as simple as taking a sip of water, and I would just keep retaking that sip over and over because until it felt right, you know,
sure,
or I
sure.
felt something bad could happen because of that. And the logical part of your brain, like I said, that doesn't make any sense, you know, how you drink your water
Mm-hmm,
can't make my dad die in a car crash tonight. But these
mm-hmm,
thoughts would be so sharp and specific, and that was what the disease was. And part of it was not being on the correct medication for it, and part of it was not knowing how to handle it. And knowing now, I still have uh, mild to moderate symptoms sometimes, and I'm able to handle them like that usually because I know what
mm,
I have,
yeah,
and I've
yeah.
had it for 30 years now. I'm 45 now, and this started when I was 16, so I've some painfully acquired expertise has come around with all this time. And so that's what my symptoms were, to answer your question. That's what my symptoms descended into. Just doubting everything, doubting if I was at a place where I was, doubting who I had been around, just doubting everything.
Mm.
And especially anything positive that happened, I would doubt whether it actually happened. And then there would be these, it would snowball into these fears of, well, walk a certain way, or brush your teeth a certain way, or chew your
Mhm.
food a certain way, or else something horrible is going to happen, or else even you're going to do something horrible. And
Yeah.
it was terrifying, because to a good normal person, those kind of thoughts are petrifying, that I could do something against my own wishes to harm someone I cared about. There was nothing worse I could think of than that. And that's what my OCD knows to go right where it hurts you the most. And it's the most vicious, vile enemy you can have until you learn how to play its game and how to beat it. And that's what I learned in my Life Interrupted. I share how you beat OCD, which I did, how you overcome it, how you survive, how you recover, how you get to a better place, how you accept that it's a chronic condition that may always be there a little bit to some degree, but it's nothing like it used to be. I'm a free person today. It's not like how it used to be from ages 16 to 21. So you can get better, and but those were what my symptoms were, and that's what made it so uh, shocking and vile and disgusting and revolting in my own mind, that the thought of sharing it with someone just became not an option.
Mm. I think one other thing that I want to tease out for the audience is awareness of dissent. So, particularly reflecting on my own experiences with anxiety, low to moderate levels of anxiety, where I didn't really know I had anxiety at first. I thought, hey, maybe it's maybe it's just like I'm nervous, I'm stressed, but there was a recurring pattern of fear, right? And I started to just kind of hold it in, and it manifested in mental and physical ways that over time I just realized, okay, it's been 2 or 3 years, it's been this way, maybe I've got to talk to someone about this. And then, long story short, I realized I have anxiety. How might you know a someone that's not sure if they have any mental health challenge that they're experiencing, how should they kind of listen to their cues, be aware of their kind of that awareness of dissent, sort of that piece that you were referencing a little earlier? How can someone get to a place before it's too revolting or potentially tragic? How can we help folks to kind of get to that awareness piece? Any thoughts there?
Well, I think today, I grew up in the 1980s and the 1990s. And I think today it's 2021. There's a lot more awareness and focus, at least I believe, on a lot of different things, on minority rights, on LGBTQ plus rights, and also I think on mental health. And I think if anybody has these doubts and questions today, I'm hoping there's a lot less stigma than there was back when I was growing up, some 30, 40 years ago, really. And I think it's a good idea to get it checked out. Go see a psychologist, a therapist, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's
Mhm.
absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I think, hopefully, like I said, today it's more widely known that practically almost everybody I know at some point has seen a therapist, or at some point has been on some kind of medication for something. It's not like this sheltered, isolated case of just one person this is happening to. This is happening widely to a lot of people. And I think it's to not go through those years that I had to go through of not knowing what was wrong and stuff. I think if you have those concerns about whether or not you're anxious, talk to somebody. And it's 100% confidential. I mean, a therapist has a license that they are not allowed to disclose anything you say to them. So the only way your friends or even your family would ever find out you went to a therapist is if you choose to tell them, and you don't have to tell them.
Mhm. Mhm.
I mean, it'd be nice if you could, but if you don't have to, you don't have to. It's not their business. It's your business, and a therapist is sworn to confidentiality. I mean, just like a lawyer or somebody is, that you talk to them, it's going to be 150% confidential. They're not going to tell anybody. So there's really no reason not to just, and they're not going to judge you because they're a mental health professional. They're not your
Right.
friends. They're not your parents. Your relatives, in-laws. They're just someone you're dating. They're mental health professional that's doing their job. And there's no harm in consulting them, and if they say that this is something that it's just a little anxiety, that's fine. But if they recommend that, maybe you need to, try some counseling. Maybe there's some things you can change in the way you respond to your own anxiety, which is a big part of my treatment for OCD. And even for, panic attacks that I had and general anxiety. I think I had all of those. And just learning yourself how to change your own approach when you are triggered and when you're feeling anxious, how to respond to feeling anxious. And I think one of the big keys is that right away, typically if I feel anxious, I see it as a bad thing. That what did I do wrong now? I'm back, back in trouble again. I'm feeling anxious again. This is like a setback. It's not a setback. It comes with the territory. How you respond to it determines what happens next. And it's okay to be anxious, just let yourself be anxious. That's okay. I always told myself it's not okay. It's bad for my health to be anxious. No, it's fine to be anxious. Let yourself be anxious. Right away, allowing it actually is taking away some of your anxiety and trying to block it out. That was a big step for me. And so I think there's nothing wrong with getting it checked out, and then if the person thinks that maybe you do need to try some meds, I mean, be willing. You have to be willing to go a little outside of your comfort zone, and maybe follow if you do see a mental health professional, which I would recommend if you're having these issues, to follow their advice and put some trust in them. And I mean, right now I take meds, and I may have to take them. Have to take them long term. But it's just one little pill in the morning and one pill at night, and that's it. I don't really think about it. I don't have side effects. The night one just helps me sleep a little better, and you're not supposed to drink alcohol too much when you're on these, but it's not a big deal. It's really not a big deal, and a lot of people won't even have to stay on meds or take meds for that long. So I think it's any alternative is better than being silent and suffering. That's the worst, because you don't know what's wrong with you. For so many years, I wondered, does what I have a name? I vividly remember thinking, what is the name for what I have? And that's just, it's tragic, because those 5 years didn't have to be spent the way they were spent. And hopefully people that can watch this can see that whatever their secret is or their problem is, it's always better to talk about it.
Sure. So speaking of the world that we live in, with more awareness on minority rights, LGBTQ plus, one topic that's on everyone's mind is COVID-19. We thought we were kind of getting past it, and as we speak at the end of July, CDC is revising their masking guidance. So lots of different it doesn't seem like we're closing the chapter on COVID-19. From a mental health perspective, COVID has worsened anxiety, depression, and mental illness, statistically speaking. Talk to me about what you're seeing firsthand as you speak with communities across the country. Do you think greener pastures are ahead for us?
I do believe greener pastures are ahead. I believe that from my own experience with what I went through, and I also believe that from what all of us went through with COVID. I mean, from March of 2020 till about May of 2021 was very, very difficult. I really sheltered quite a bit. I wore masks all the time. Because I didn't get vaccinated and fully immune until the end of May 2021. So for those 14 months, it was very nerve-wracking. It was tense. I have parents in their 70s. I was always worried about giving them something, and they didn't. They got vaccinated slightly before me, so that worry kind of reduced. So I think there really is hope, and I would just hope that more and more people just do the common sense thing and get themselves vaccinated, and that would, I think, be a big reason for more hope to be there. But I think there is hope. Absolutely, there's hope, and we know we can go through this. We went through a worse situation than what it is now. I mean, now if we have to wear masks for a little bit again, hey, we wear masks. I feel 100 times better since I've had my 2 shots and then waited 2 weeks after my second shot, when you're supposedly fully immune at like 90% immunity or whatever, which was May 24th for me. And since then, I felt much, much better. And even now, I don't really think about COVID. I'm not that worried about it because I got my vaccinations. And so I would really recommend that for everybody, that because it seems like what we're seeing now is a lot of the people that are in the hospital with serious illness unfortunately didn't get their vaccines and yet.
Mhm.
And so I just recommend that that would probably help the greater good. And if we have to go through some difficulties and some inconveniences again, wearing masks and stuff, we can do it. But so I don't think it has to be anywhere as nerve-wracking and frightening and a constant worry as it was those 14 months before, uh, before my, like for me personally, before my parents in their 70s were vaccinated, before I was vaccinated, constantly had to wear a mask around each other and be worried that I could give it to a vulnerable person, or get a little tickle in your throat and wonder, do I have COVID, and so I think for me, getting the vaccine really eased those. And there's always going to be, there's always going to be variants coming up and stuff. And I think if we can all cooperate and do this, we'll get through this second little bit just like we got through the first part. But anxiety is normal. There's normal to have more anxiety now because it's another stress again. And even just in thinking that, hey, I'm going to go somewhere. Did I bring my mask?
Right.
Even that's an anxiety. So I
Mhm.
think it's okay that people are feeling a little bit more like, again, it may feel like a little setback, but I think the more people can, get vaccinated, and if there's guidelines we have to follow for a little bit longer, we follow them, we will again come out the other side, and hopefully we don't have a pandemic like this again for a very, very long time. We have to remember too, this is the first one we've all had
Mhm.
in our lifetimes. And so it's
Sure.
not like fortunately, it's not an everyday thing.
Mhm.
Um, And so we just have to kind of stay strong. And I think it's a bit easier to stay strong now that so many more people are vaccinated. And there's generally, I would hope there's less spread as a result of that. So,
Yeah. No, I think your no nonsense guidance makes a lot of sense, and just getting vaccinated is going to be really really important for those that might be worried, might be a little anxious about what they're dealing with. If with the anxiety asset for those that are avid readers or listeners, one of the ways to do that is to really turn your thoughts, which I call scaries, into confidence boosters, right? There are any things that are thoughts that you might want to challenge with something that could be a little more positive. I think there are ways to really kind of think through that. So I think those themes really resonate with what the audience might be hearing. A little bit of a transition though,
sure.
about mental health issues within the context of South Asian communities. um, so for context, myself, Vineet, and we have our esteemed guest, Sumi. We're both South Asian men. And while I think we're both raised in North America largely, um, South Asian community typically stigmatizes mental health a lot more than what we would see in North America. Um, and I think, even talking to my own personal experience, even when I had anxiety, and I knew it amongst my loved ones, I did not count my loved ones as my parents to be really aware of my condition. I didn't feel comfortable until more recently to share that, um, because of the stigma associated with mental health and those illnesses. So I'm curious, from your perspective, Sumi, have you observed this as well? And what might you want to share with our community about the importance of mental health specifically?
Well, I think I have observed this as well. I guess in one sense, I'm really fortunate that my parents kind of had a different mindset. My mom actually is a psychologist. She's a licensed
Mm,
psychologist.
okay.
So from a young age, I think I had it different than a lot of people in the South Asian, community have had that. I didn't feel there was that much stigma. I was more afraid that, my mom's a mental health professional. If there really is something wrong with me, she might have to put me in a mental institution. That was my fear. I wasn't as
Mm,
afraid of uh, that kind of stigma. But what I've heard is a lot of people in South Asian community do have that stigma. And again, I'll just remind them that just listen to me. I'm a South Asian man myself, and there's no reason to feel stigma. This is normal stuff that happens to human beings of all races, all ethnicities, all religious backgrounds and beliefs. Whether you believe in God or not, I mean, it doesn't matter. We're all human beings, and all human beings have anxiety at some point, or many human beings at some point can have issues with anxiety. And I think it's, and again, that's where it's so important that, you don't have to, internally, you shouldn't feel ashamed. And I'm telling you that because there is nothing to be ashamed of. We all go to the doctor for physical problems, and we should all be able to feel free to go to the doctor for a mental problem too. It's no different really than, very often, like my OCD, I found out is caused primarily by a chemical imbalance in my brain. So that's nothing that is something I did, or that I did something that I deserved this, or that this is my fault or something. It's a chemical imbalance in the brain, just like how people develop other physical ailments and stuff. And that's why medication often is the answer, because it fixes the chemical imbalance. And it does,
Mm,
because, and I know it does because I was bold enough as to go off my meds at one point, thinking I was all better, against my doctor's advice. And that's when I ended up in the hospital for 16 days. And
mm,
since then, I've never gone off my meds again. So I learned my lesson there. But so it really does make a difference. You still have the issues, but you can deal with them if the chemistry in your brain is kind of been corrected. And so that's what. But to get back to the stigma, there's no reason to feel it. There's no reason to feel ashamed of it. This isn't the dark ages anymore. This is 2021. There's no reason to feel stigma or shame about a lot of the things we talked about today, like being minority or LGBTQ plus group. There's no reason to feel shame about any of this stuff, or being a victim of bullying, or being a victim of a survivor of sexual assault or something. And I think that uh, it's really important that, again, if first of all, not to internally feel it, but maybe you feel okay about yourself, but you think others are going to judge you. You don't have to tell anybody. I tell, because this is what I do now, and I have no problem. I'm comfortable now talking about it. I really am okay with anybody that knows all my books have private details about my life and stuff. And it's kind of like, I'm an open book now because it's all in writing. So it's funny too. Sometimes I start dating somebody and they're like, well, I'm going to read your book to get to know you really good, better than talking to you. So it's out there, but nobody has to be that open. I mean, but it's just that if you want, you can dodge the stigma. If you feel that stigma, you don't have to tell your family and friends. At least you don't have to tell them right away. You
mm.
talk to a mental health professional. It's 150% confidential. So the issue doesn't even come up. It's never going to be put on the internet or reported to anybody unless you decide to report it yourself. So either way, first of all, a person shouldn't feel stigma because there's nothing wrong with getting help. It actually takes strength to be strong enough to admit that, hey, I need help. Because big secret, everybody does. Not everybody's strong enough to admit it. I think it
Mm.
takes the guts to admit, hey, I need help. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not perfect. I'm not God. I'm just a human being and I need help and I'm going to get help. And that's okay. And if there's people in your life that, even people you love dearly, that don't understand that, maybe they were raised different, they were raised in a different country where the standard was different, they don't have to know every little thing. You do what's right for you, and then someday you want to tell them, you tell them. So
No, I love that, particularly how you referenced, maybe winding back a little bit, about the physical, how physical ailments should be treated equally as mental ailments and illnesses. You know, if I've got a scratch on my ankle, right, and I got to go to see the doctor might throw on a Band-Aid.
right.
If I've got anxiety, and here's a question coming for you. What are, I want to get your perspective on what are some band-aids that have worked for you for, quote unquote band-aids in managing your anxiety? What tips or tools have worked well for you?
I would say, well, of course, in my case, and not everybody that has anxiety needs medication. That's definitely not true. Some people just need to talk, and some people just need to learn some better techniques of dealing with their anxiety. And depending on the nature of the anxiety, I think the techniques could be different. But for starters, though, if you do have to be on medicine, medication definitely can help, because if it is caused by a chemical imbalance in your brain, lack of serotonin, which is what my issue was, that there's serotonin reuptake inhibitors that, the meds that I'm on, that basically allow the serotonin to get to where it needs to get, and then you don't have as much of a problem. So that's kind of one easy way. But other ways of coping with it, I think, is is not to panic, not to blame yourself when you start to feel anxious, when you start to feel triggered, not to see it as a loss or a setback. Just see it as, hey, I have some anxiety. I have some anxiety issues. That's okay. I'm feeling a little anxious right now. That's all right. And to get busy with things, get busy with life, not to sit there and dwell on it. To focus on the things in your life that keep you entertained, keep you happy, keep you busy. And to For me personally, with my OCD, the treatment was allowing yourself to feel anxious.
Hmm.
So the treatment for me was very much a paradox that I'm coming to you for help. I'm in this hospital by my own choice, but I'm in this hospital in this intense OCD program because I want help. I want relief from my anxiety. And everybody's telling me, all the staff and everything is telling me, we want you to feel more anxious as a way to get rid of it. And because and what the biggest concept I learned was that anxiety and obsessive thoughts and anxious thoughts and stuff are typically all classify under one heading: unwelcome. These are
Hmm.
unwelcome feelings, unwelcome thoughts, and you're trying your best to not have them, to push them out. Oh, it's a good day because I didn't feel anxious today. That's how we measure success. So when we feel anxious, it feels like a failure. And instead of that, you kind of have to look at it as embracing the anxiety, allowing it to be there. And then paradoxically, by not having it be such an unwelcome phenomenon, sort of letting it be there, it kind of just goes away on its own. And the analogy that one of my therapists, I can't remember what program I was in or what therapist or what group had used this analogy. It's kind of like you're throwing a party and a bunch of people that you don't want at the party, disruptive, loud, obnoxious people, keep crashing your party. And you keep trying to keep them out, keep them out, keep them out. And the more you keep them out, it's a game to them. They want to keep crashing your party, right? And if you finally just throw open the doors and say, fine, come on in, hang out here. I'm not going to put the effort to keep you out. Stay here, be obnoxious, sit here in front of me. I'll deal with it. You're welcome here. It's not a big deal. What do? They're kind of like, oh, well, this isn't so fun. We're just going to leave now. And that's kind of the same thing for how anxiety works. It's a strange way to think of it, but that analogy really has fit for me. That by making something unwanted and unwelcome, you're giving it power. You're building it up. You're, without wanting to, you're giving it extra power and strength and empowering it to get stronger, because you're seeing that it's taking over your life. And by saying, hey, it's okay to be anxious. Because, and the secret too is, and I learned this when I was overcoming some of my phobias that I had, like fear of being in an elevator or fear of heights. And the assistant that I can remember specifically where I can remember where I learned this one from. The assistant, had me go to the Mall of America and stand in one of the parking ramps and just look down. And he's like, how do you feel? I said, I feel jittery and I'm shaking and I feel really anxious and I feel like I might fall over, and my heart's pounding. And then he's like, that feeling can't last. Just physically, it cannot last for a prolonged period of time. Your neurons can't keep firing at that level. So the longer you stand here, eventually that anxiety is going to go down, just by letting it be there. And it worked. By doing that, 10 minutes later, I'm like, we start talking about something and I'm still, kind of nervous and shaky. He's like, let's have a conversation. Okay, we're having a conversation. And we'll start talking about something and I'll still be looking down. Then he's like, now how do you feel? Oh, it's a bit less. Yeah, I'm kind of okay looking down. Feel like I accomplished something, So I think allowing it to be there is the first step of getting rid of it. So I was taught it was a paradox. It's a paradox, and you have to welcome it in order for it to ultimately leave, and not. And you have to be. Anxiety can be chronic. So if it comes back, you have to know that, hey, sometimes it's going to come. And I still have to say this stuff to myself. Just the other day, I was, I was having a really good time. It was a really nice, and oftentimes for me, my anxiety comes when I'm having a really good time. When things are going really well and I'm really happy, bang, this negative thought comes in like, oh, well, what if your anxiety were to ruin this moment for you? And so then right away, my first initial reaction is, oh God, I don't want to be thinking this right now. I'm having fun. Maybe I'm out with friends. I'm doing something. I don't want to be feeling this right now. And that's the wrong attitude. The attitude is, okay, fine, I feel this right now. It's okay. I'm still having a pretty good time. It's not the end of the world. It'll go away. It always does. And just going through it enough times. I mean, now, I'm 45, so I've had enough victories over the last 30 years that I've convinced myself that you can recover from this and you can get through this and you can have anxiety, but how you address it. There could be other techniques too. That's why it's always, I'm not a mental health professional. I've been through a lot, but it's always good if you're having these issues to consult a mental health professional, because based on the kind of anxiety you have, maybe my approach isn't right for you. So that's why it's important to say that a mental health professional who knows you personally, knows your situation personally, may recommend, I don't know, some deep breathing or some other kind of thought stuff, how you work with your thoughts. I'm just sharing what, from having OCD and stuff, what worked for me, but it's
Mhm.
always better to consult an actual professional that has a degree and knows the mental health field better than me and knows your situation better than me, because everything can be different. But for me, if you even just learn tools of how to deal with your anxiety when it rears its head, I think that is a very, very helpful, immeasurably helpful thing to know, because then you have the confidence that I feel anxious, I know I can deal with it.
Yeah, no, I think
And one
that,
other thing, not to cut you off, but one
yeah,
other
no, go
thing too
ahead.
is I would always worry about, like, I'd have this obsessive fear of my health. I'd be into working out and stuff, and when I'd feel anxious, I'd feel my heart pounding, and I'd be like, oh, is this bad for my health? This fear of, oh, if I'm feeling anxious, it's harming my health, or I just had a good workout and now I'm feeling all this anxiety. My anxiety is going to kill the effects of the workout. I'd always have these kind of thoughts, and you can't think that way. You have to think, hey, if I feel anxious, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. It'll go away. Get busy with other stuff. Do things that make you happy. Do things that keep you busy, and you will get through it. And if it's still being hard, consulting a mental health professional helps. If it's to the point where you do need medicine, I hope people have an open mind about that. That
Mm,
medicine helps us. I mean, a lot of people are, especially like you bring up the COVID thing. A lot of people are afraid of the vaccine and afraid of
yep.
medicine, but medicines have helped us and saved us for generations and generations now. And we would all have, what would we have? We'd have polio, whooping cough, measles. We'd have all these diseases if it weren't for vaccines and medicines. So I think people should hopefully at least have an open mind that uh, if a mental health professional thinks you should try something, maybe have an open mind to trying it, because that might help you only. So.
Mm. No, and I love the sort of reflections on yourself. I also want to call you Mr. Quotable. Allow yourself to feel anxious. I think
Yes, yeah.
that is an incredible sort of paradigm shift that, at least with the anxiety asset, is certainly something that I certainly 100% resonate with. I know folks that are listening certainly would too. Since this website's called the Anxiety Asset, do you feel anxiety in any way has been an asset for you? Either way, what advice do you have for those aspiring to develop an anxiety asset mindset?
I think by taking, the way you can develop an anxiety asset mindset is by taking control over the problem. And I think that is kind of all the things we've discussed, that being willing to, not giving into that, that fear and that stigma, being willing to talk about it, even if it is only confidentially with a mental health professional, but being willing to talk about it, and being willing to try a different approach, I think, and to feel like I want to take control of my anxiety. And because anxiety itself is not a bad thing, I mean, we all, anxiety can be a good thing, fear can be a good thing. These things can save us. If there's a tiger in front of you, you should be anxious, or you see lightning outside, you shouldn't go outside and play when it's lightning all over. I mean, it stems from a normal good need that's a reflex for us to protect ourselves from something that's harmful. But I think when it becomes to the point where it's becoming irrational and taking over your life, then you have to be willing to step outside of your comfort zone. Which, I mean, if you think about it, there's no reason not to, because if you're dealing with anxiety, you're anxious anyway. So what harm is it to step a little more outside of your comfort zone and try something that might help?
Sure. Yeah.
So I think that's a good way to look at it, because I remember being like with OCD, I was so afraid to try some of these new things. And it was like, well, now looking back on it, it's like, well, I was so miserable and anxious anyway. Why was I so afraid to do something that was outside of, because you're so used to doing it one way. And it takes retraining your brain to try something different, which I explain at the end of A Life Interrupted. I explain that specifically for OCD, there's a lot of other kinds of anxiety which could be different, but for OCD especially is being willing to try a new approach, having an open mind, being willing to try a new approach, and seeing it is that you're not gonna 100% get rid of it, but I mean, to this day, my OCD and my anxiety used to control me about probably between 90 to 100% of my life would be controlled when it was at its worst, or between 85 to 100% of my life was controlled by my illness. Now it's 20 to 30% controlled.
Hmm.
Now you can think negatively like, oh, so he's not really cured, but you can look at it the other way. Do you know the difference from having 85 to 100% of your life controlled by something to only having 20 to 30% of your life controlled by it? That's a phenomenal victory. You can live life to the fullest, enjoy everything to the fullest. And there's still some of those issues there, but you know how to deal with them. So it's not, I call that recovery. It's never, I mean, they haven't invented the pill yet where it's 100% gone and it'll never ever come back, but I call where I'm at recovery. I mean, it's a big difference only having it control 20% or 30% of your life than it controlling 85 to 100% of your life.
Well, with Sumi's wise words, let's all take control of our problem, develop that anxiety asset. Sumi Mukherjee, everyone, thank you so much for your time today. Please check him out. What was your website?
My website is authorsumi.com. It's very easy, just AUTHOR, S as in Sam, UMI, authorsumi.com. And
Yes,
all my 4 books are available on there.
perfect. Well, check him out. Thank you for your time. Have a
Thank
great
you very
one.
much. I enjoy it. I enjoy talking about this stuff now because I'm in a position where I can talk about it and not be that 16 to 21-year-old that lost those years and felt like a victim. Now I can empower other people. So thank you.
Perfect.